Hi friends, today I am just playing with some little leaves, and what I actually wanted to play with it today was double loading my brush, which is always really fun for me. And I think so this is a really old brush. Let's see if I might have a newer one. Yeah, here's an angle shader. It's a 3/8 inch. And this is the Princeton Velvet Touch. So I think I will go ahead and use that. And what I'm going to be doing is dipping one side of my brush in one color and the other side in another. So I'll get this beautiful blend of both colors together. So let's see, let's go through first and just create the stem, and I'm using, you can use burnt sienna, burnt umber, whatever is kind of your go-to color, maybe even green. I've got my Meeden palette here, which I love because it has these big giant wells, and this is that Artisto paper that I use. It's the 140-pound cold press, and I just love that they're in this little ring binder because I can save them all in one place and come back. So I've got my paint and I'm pointing, so the angle shader is on a diagonal here. It's really good for leaves, but I'm going to use it for a few different things here. So I'm going to hold my brush with the point, the tip or the toe, facing towards me. Light pressure, resting my hand on my paper, and let's just create that stem. You can get, and I'm moving my palm. The palm of my hand is moving with my brush. There we go. So I've got this stem here. Then I'm going to go in using the tip of my brush. I'm not double loading yet. And just draw out some little stems here. So I can get a pretty fine line with this. And there we go. We can add more in as we go. And now I'm going to go into that double loading. So I'm going to dip either side of my brush and then turn it over and dip the other side in the blue. And let's see what we get here. Holding my brush parallel like that, point, pressing out, wiggle, 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 just like that. Now I'm going to turn my brush and the point is sticking away from me, and maybe pick up a little bit more of that paint on each side. Point, wiggle, 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 and come in. Look at how pretty that is. You get all this wonderful mix of colors. So again, getting each side of my brush with a different color. I'm putting the tip of the brush towards me, light pressure, and then I start kind of turning it on its side and end coming up on the tip. And I think I'll just leave that one like that. I'll go in again, one side green, one side red. Tip is pointed towards me, and then start wiggling the brush like that. That one I really wiggled, didn't I? Point, and you'll find, like me, I really have one side I can do better, either the right or left side of the leaf. So tapping in again, loading my brush. But you get this beautiful blending. So this time I'm starting from the top of my leaf down, because I can always paint my right side better So now I'm going on the left side. So I'm going to go from the top down, but find what works best for you. So holding my brush with the thin, not flat. And I'm resting my wrist here. Point, wiggle, 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 and then twist and come in. Point, wiggle, 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 and come in. And try and vary your leaves so they're not all the same. Load my brush again and maybe do one coming out of the top here. Point, wiggle, 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 and load my brush. Point, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And there you go. The more pressure I put on my brush, the wider the stroke I'm going to get. And this is where your warm-ups come really handy to know this. Point, now I turn my brush like that, and I could leave that actually like that. I don't even have to do the other side. Point, wiggle, 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 twist my brush. Point, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. So that leaf is kind of a fat one, but I like doing all these different colors, or shapes rather, colors too. Now on my right side, for whatever reason, I start with the point towards me. So find what's comfortable for you. Point, pull, and start turning your brush. So you're pulling out and twisting your brush. You could definitely go in there and add a little bit of blue if you wanted to while that's wet. That would be pretty. Let's do one more leaf over here. Load each side of my brush and point, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Point, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. So have fun with those. Kind of create your own little designs. I'm going to rinse my brush a bit and maybe come up with a leaf coming out here that's a lighter value, just meaning I have a little bit more water than pigment. Point, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Play with twisting your brush too. Point, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. So I've got this very light value which just pushed that to the back. Now I'm going to go in with the stem and just add that in while it's wet. Let's go in again, load our brush, rinse it just a tiny bit, and let's go right here. Point, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. So playing with these values is really important because you want interest in your painting. Point, wiggle, wiggle. I'm just picking up some of the paint on my Meeden palette here, my Meeden well rather. Point, wiggle, 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 and then twist and come in. So if you see right away, these lighter values are pushing into the background. Now I might go in and just add a little bit there. Rinse my brush, scrape it off. Point, wiggle, 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 wiggle. So you're getting this really fun interest in the background. Point, come down, come out the other side, and twist your brush. There we go. We'll do maybe another one here. So I'm loading my brush very lightly, and then I just rinse it a bit to lighten that value and scrape it off. Wiggle, 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 twist. So I've got these fun leaves in the background. Now I might go into this it's pretty dry already. Just to add something special for kind of the season is let's go into it with, I've got this MeiLang palette here that are all of my colors. Winsor Newton is fine, but I've got this MeiLang palette and it has the metallics, which are always fun to play with. And I'm going to pick up some of that gold. You can also get their smaller palette to start with that doesn't have the metallics, which is a great little palette for beginners because you don't have to worry about mixing all these colors. And let's just add some gold in here. I'm going to wait till I know it's dry, and I know it's dry because it isn't cool to the touch. And just add some sparkle. Like that. So pretty, really gets noticed. I hope you can see that. Pick up a little bit more. Just using the tip of my brush and just adding some little veins, very light pressure, resting my palm on my pad here. And look how beautiful. Just, you can take a very simple painting and make it really pop. Point like that. Do one more down here. Point. There we go. Point. And this would make a beautiful little card. Very simple and clean. And it really makes you stop and look because you can see that sparkle come out. So there you go. I hope you can kind of pick up that gold that I've got in there. So I've got my different values. I've got my light value, which is more water. I've got my darker values, which makes those leaves pop out. And I was double loading my brush. And you can't really, that I have found, that works for me. I'm sure somebody has done it, but double load these round brushes because they have a tip on them. To double load, you kind of need this flat tip or toe of your brush. You could probably use a dagger, I think would be pretty, or maybe a filbert might be nice. You could double load, but not a round. So I think I'm pretty much done with that. I think this would be really pretty with maybe some reds or browns in the background. This is the Rose Madder from MeiLang. And you could maybe double dip. Let me rinse my brush here. And I'll dip the one side into that red. You could use Quin Magenta here and maybe the other side into the yellow. And let's see what that comes out as. Maybe we have another branch coming out here. Point, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Point, wiggle, wiggle. So look how pretty that would be with this. Let's draw a branch coming out there. I'm going to rinse my brush off here. Pick up some of that brown, maybe a little green. And touch in, create some little branches coming out. And now we'll go back to our leaf. I'll pick up some of that red on one side and then some of the yellow on the other. That's really pretty together. And the tip, the point of my brush, the tip or the toe of the brush is pointing outwards. Point, wiggle, 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 twist, and end. Pick up that paint again. do the other side, point, wiggle. So when I'm doing the majority of my leaf, I'm twisting my brush. So I'm starting like this. And then as I go into the body of my leaf, I'm twisting my brush so I can get the flat part. So let's do that again. Pick up that red, pick up that yellow. Let's do one right here. Point. There we go. That's really pretty. Let's put a couple more in the background. So I'm just going to rinse my brush a little bit, scrape it off. Point. And as you see, those are much lighter because I've rinsed my brush a bit. I'm just putting them in the background here to make them look like they're tucked in. And you can get a pretty fine point with this, so play with that. Let's do this again. Load one side of my brush with the red, the other side with the gold. And let's have another leaf coming out here, but tucked behind here. So we're just doing a little bit here. And maybe it sticks out up here. So I'm just tucking these in, painting in that negative space, just meaning I'm painting around these other leaves. And maybe we'll do one right here. Let me pick up some of that red, some of that gold. And then filling in around these leaves, maybe even the very tip here. So look how fun that is. I feel like we could come out here with some of these. So let's pick up our brownish green and create a little stem right here. Using our brush sideways, light pressure, resting the palm. Now I notice a lot of you can paint holding your hand up. I can't. My hand would wiggle all over. So I always rest my hand. And we'll just create a little branch coming out here. These are the little stems. Like that. Wash and rinse my brush. And we go back to loading. So pick up some of that red on one side. Flop your brush over, pick up that gold. And let's create our leaves. Tip of the brush facing me. There we go. So I think that's really interesting. It's tucked behind there. I think that's fun. Load my brush, one side red, one side gold or yellow. And I might just leave it like that. Wiggling your brush around. Just twisting it, playing. Now I feel like we might need one coming out here. Got kind of a rogue stem there. There we go. Look how beautiful. Isn't that fun? So I've got this V-shaped composition. I've got our reds around the paper. If I hadn't added this in, I think that might be a little boring, but I kind of brought your eye from here down and it travels out. So I think that's really pretty. Now I can go back in. I'm not sure how much the gold will show up on the red. Maybe we'll use the MeiLang bronze. Let's see what that does. That might show up a little bit more. Pick some of that up. And these are dry, I can tell, because they're not cold to the touch. So that doesn't show up as much on the red. And that's because red actually has some warm yellow in it. So the gold, of course, is got that warm yellow in it, but it's still very pretty. Now I can't paint all of these because some of these are wet. You could actually even add in, let's see here, something like that. I don't want to overwork this so much. Just doing some little dabs here and there. So it looks like little buds maybe coming out. That's kind of pretty. And there you go. All right, so play and have fun with this. Play with your values, meaning some of these are darker values, some are lighter. And play with putting lighter, meaning more water than pigment, behind the other leaves. That really creates some depth and pulls your eye into the painting. And I will list all of my supplies on the description. Have fun. I think this would be really cute framed with a grouping of these little botanicals. Have fun, everybody. All right, I'll see you soon.